Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Barry and I have a great show for you today. We thought we'd already done this one, but apparently we haven't. So
for all these episodes, we hadn't touched it yet.
Exactly. Yeah. So we are going to talk about love languages. And I've got a feeling Barry and I are going to see this differently.
Well, we'll see.
An interesting show. First of all, I always have a little bit of a thing about cutesy pigeoning, sort of the 5 ways to do this and the 5 ways to do that. So I can just feel my resistance comes up a little bit, even then. But originally, these love languages, the 5 languages of love, were conceived by or written first by Gary Chapman. I wouldn't say conceived by, but certainly articulated and put into a book. And I think it was like 1990, 92, somewhere around there, the early 90s.
Yeah.
And, the 5 languages that he references, because there are lots of others. I've noticed a lot of other people are coming up with their own versions of their love languages. But the 5 I think we should talk about today, and which were the original 5, are acts of love, receiving gifts, quality time, words of affirmation, and physical touch.
Except the first one is acts of service, not acts of love. Although maybe they'll like you.
You're absolutely right. I mean, see that, and I have it written here, and I still said acts of love.
Well, they're all acts of love, just different ways of doing it.
Exactly.
But just to I want to say one thing also. Gary Chapman, because I heard him interview once, and it's in his book too. He talks about how basically, because he's been a therapist for 30 plus years, and really what he found was the sort of the common threads. Mm-hmm. So they were like all the extremes. Is like just as you were saying, like, they weren't the only ones, but they were the most common reasons that people didn't like match up and communicate, which is why he called them languages. And so the 5 that he distilled down as being the most common ways people express or feel like they receive love, and that's what it's really about.
Yeah, and you know what I've noticed is I think the relationship you're in also influences how you feel loved in that relationship. Because I remember, the reason why, I'll tell you why, is years ago, I took the test in the 90s when it first came out. Mm-hmm. And well, actually, maybe I'd already been in my long-term relationship a long time by then, so maybe I read it in the mid-90s. But I noticed that when I took it then, my way of feeling loved was receiving gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting, and I thought about it because I just redid the test, or was going through it rather, and I really could identify that in the relationship I'm in now, receiving gifts is not a big part of it for me at all. So I can see that I've changed, and I kept thinking, well, is it me that's evolved over this time, or is it just the dynamics of the relationship? And I actually really think it is the dynamics of the relationship.
Interesting, because I would offer a slightly different perspective on that. I do agree that we evolve, but I also suggest, because it hit me as well, is that, as we talked about before, about our own upbringings and our family dynamics, because we tend to inherit our relationship and love patterns from our parents, or lack thereof if there aren't any. I suspect that the love languages we get imprinted with come from that initially. So, for example, if you're raised in a family where the parents never really showed any physical affection, but they gave you gifts or they told you things, and so that's the way you believe love was in. It's kind of, that's the wiring you took on. But maybe you got into an adult relationship where your partner showed you love in a different way, energetically, where they held you differently that you never had when you were a child. Mm-hmm. That may become more infused or reinforces the way you feel love, mostly that way. So I do believe, as you said, that we evolved. I think it's a lot to do with what we're raised with versus what we choose as an adult that may influence our love patterns, our love languages.
Totally agree with you 100%. I do think our childhood impacts very much how we feel and experience love. And I think what I'm referencing is I was in a relationship prior to my very long-term relationship, or maybe I'll just come out and say my marriage. But prior to that, I was in a relationship with somebody that was so loving and so, I messed it up. He was a beautiful man. And he would buy me a gift, and it would mean the world to me because I just felt that he would have given me the shirt off his back, that he was thinking of me, that he would take the time and do all the, make it so special. So I really appreciated that gift, or gifts, I should say, over the few years we were together. And then I think in my marriage, I felt that I wasn't a priority, and that my ex was quite happy to keep buying himself gifts and not me.
Hmm.
And I was like an afterthought. So gifts became very important to me. And things like if it was my birthday and it was like, well, I'll get you something later. It was the message I got was, you're not important enough to put time and effort into this to make it special on say, in the morning of your birthday. It was
Right.
sort of like an afterthought. So that really wounded me. So I became very much focused on the I'm not getting a gift sort of thing.
Mhm.
Whereas in the relationship I'm in now, the gifts I can get sometimes are so funny, but they're so thoughtful because I might have said one thing 6 months ago. Like the last gift I got was a deep fryer, believe it or not. Not a ring, not a piece of jewelry, but a deep fryer because I really enjoy making steak au poivre with pommes frites like once every couple of months. For my family, it's one of the meals I make for them. It's really hard to make French fries for three grown men without a deep fryer. But
Hmm.
the fact that he heard this months and months and months ago, and it was on his radar to go, oh, that's something she needs and wants. That type of thing. So I think it goes so much deeper than just the gift. To me, it's to say, I don't know how to say it. It's not that you're constantly on my mind, but that I think about you even when I'm not with you.
Well, it's the thing that you're valued because the fact he remembers what you like, and because
Yes.
he is doing something about it, it's almost confirming he does love me, he does appreciate me because he thanks for those things. But the other part also about the gifts piece is gifts is not based on money. The
No.
thing about gifts is oftentimes it could be something like love notes. It could be
Hmm.
doing something where they give you like a little piece of chocolate could be a gift. I mean, it's that sort of level. And it's funny, just a sidebar. Like I remember John Gray said this once in one of his talks about the thing is that women keep track of things by as points, sort of thing. Every time if we give something to a woman, it's a point. And she said there was one thing that's one that stuck in my mind is that we feel like we're being romantic when we give a woman a dozen roses. The problem is that's 1 point. If we give her one rose every day for 12 days, that's 12 points. So the idea being is like it's not the size of the gift; it's the gifting process. And so I mean, it sounds like a joke, but he says there's something about it energetically, especially when your partner, the woman, her love language is gifts.
Hmm.
It's the number of gifts versus the amount of each gift, and it can be quality absolutely. But like
Yeah.
you said, with the deep fryer, it was such a out of left field type thing. It wasn't like a pair of earrings, which you traditionally think is what a gift would be, but it's
Hmm.
something that makes your life easier that you were so happy about receiving. So he knew you
Yes,
enough
exactly.
you'll get that and value that.
Yeah, and exactly, and it goes so much deep. It's the I want to make your life easier. I know that you enjoy doing this, and I can also see how stressful it can be when you're, cooking mounds and mounds of potatoes in a, frying potatoes. So it is interesting. But as I said, the now probably within my marriage, if I'd received a deep fryer, I would have felt very different.
Yeah, like you're being used or something, or
Yeah, exactly. It would have felt the same.
right.
Um, so it's really interesting. So yeah, so I've shared a little bit about. I certainly think gift giving is a huge one for me because you're right. It's not the material thing. I think once one of my sons. Well, first of all, the I tell them please don't buy me gifts. I'm too old. I've got too much stuff. I keep giving away stuff. Don't buy me presents,
Yeah,
but they write the most beautiful cards and I treasure them. I keep every single one, and I've got literally an old-fashioned treasure chest that I put all my cards and little things, all their artwork when they were children, but all loving cards and everything like that go in there. So yes, it's still a gift of but it's both. It's the words of affirmation combined in a card
Great.
that you get to keep and
Yeah.
to read over and appreciate and hold on to, even though I know, the words are always there. But just even running out and picking wild flowers for me or something like that, that's another thing that my children have done that it just meant the world to me, that they would
Yeah.
think to do things like that. This is when they were like 6 years old. I mean, just really sweet, sweet little things.
But that's the thing, that gifts are the spectrum of gifts. It's like, because there are some people who think that, that because some people live by this, where, the value of the gift is how much they're expressing their love, sort of thing. And the reality is, it's the thought that counts. Literally, in this case, they think of something they want to give to you that they feel would give you joy, which it does, and then they get fulfilled as well, because maybe their love language is acts of service. In which case, that's the thing they can do, where they're fulfilling their own sense of love, and you get loved as well.
Yeah,
And so the joy of that is so beautiful.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because then when I grew up, we didn't have much money, so there weren't gifts. So it was, well, I shouldn't say that. There was actually, my mum would come back from the rubbish tip and bring like a Barbie doll that somebody cut all its hair off and put biro around the eyes or something like that. But to me, it was like, oh my god, this is so great. I love this. But so what about you? What has classically been your language of love? I can guess, but I'm going to.
Actually, my primary love language is, when I've done the test a few times, has always been the same two vying for top, which is quality time and physical touch.
Mm,
For me, it's because, to me, words are wonderful, but that they don't have as much impact as that spending quality time together, being connected and touching, holding hands. There's certain things that are so simple for me, but they mean the world. And it's like, one of the things I remember vividly when I was in the last relationship was the joy and the exhilaration of walking along, where we had fingers intertwined, holding hands, because there's a level of intimacy that's more than just holding hands regularly.
mhm.
That little shift was like, it juiced things up so much more. So for me, physical touch and definitely quality time, because our lives get hectic, we get very busy, and sometimes we don't have time for each other. And even if it's just a phone call, we spend time talking to each other, that's quality time as well. But those are priorities for me in relationship.
Well, and let's take that back to your childhood. Were those things you felt you got in your childhood, so therefore you replicated that in your adult life, or is that maybe there was something that was missing in your childhood, so therefore you valued it more? Or
I
what?
would say, based to look at back at my own history, I got more of the physical touch from my mum, not so much from my dad. He was very hands off in a sense, um, and his life wasn't quality time with us. It was like once in a blue moon, because he was always working, and when we got home, we were on homework. It was like that sort of traditional values family setup. Um, so the quality time and physical touch was more with my mum more than my dad, but it wasn't massively so. I think it really developed as I got older,
Mm,
and I found was just naturally what I found. Even in my friendships, were people I was close to, especially as I think when I came to the States, where it's actually safer to do so, because in England we were very standoffish, I think, in a way. So like hugging each other, holding hand, just connecting with each other as friends, male or female, and spending quality time with each other. So that was something I really found valuable for myself.
mm, yeah, yeah. It's a very interesting one. I don't know. I mean, I feel like my childhood was so complicated and so different. It's hard to really evaluate. I mean, I certainly don't remember my mother. I mean, I grew up without a father, and my mother was so busy um, and worked nights when I was very young. So I never really saw her. I mean, I have very, very few memories of my mother until probably around 10 years old. And I remember asking her once, why I don't have any memories of you. I have ones of my older siblings. And she was like, well, I worked till 2 in the morning in a hospital. I came home. I was asleep when you got up for school. And then when you were coming home from school, I was going off to, and then we started working from home. But as I said, the demands on her were always taking care of all these, you know, mentally disabled people that needed her very, very much so. And certainly in her mind, needed her more than we needed her. So she was just not available until much later in life. And then, yes, much later in life, she was wonderful. She was there, and there was a lot of physical hugging and that, but certainly not as a child. So
Mm.
it'd be really hard for me to. But yeah, I think for me more than anything, it's the knowing that you think about me even when we're not together. And I don't need to, I mean, I'm also somebody that I can go for days without speaking to my partner. It's not like I don't have that, I shouldn't say days, but I don't think we have to talk every single day. Or, some people I know, they talk like 10 times during the day, and that's certainly not me. Um, so it's very interesting. And I think the other thing I was going to comment on it was, I love what you said about the receiving gifts, because sometimes people are ashamed to say, well, I'm somebody that, loves to receive gifts, because they think it means that they're materialistic. And
Right.
said it's not anything. It's the thought that counts. It's the letting somebody know that, while they, like, for me also, whenever I was away from my children, and I still do to this day, I bring them back a gift.
Hmm.
I remember my ex-husband used to say to me, why? And I was like, just to let them know that even though I was away from them, they were on my mind. it's
Yep.
that's all I'm conveying by doing that. It's not an object.
Hmm.
um, yeah, it's a very, very interesting one. But I also, what I was going to say is, I think it's great to identify what is your primary language, and also your partner's primary language, for sure, because that's the whole point of this, is communication, and being able to communicate in a loving way that's received. I mean, this is what this is about, is you can sit there and say, but I love you, but I love you, but if the other person doesn't feel it, then there's no point. That's why, we need to learn each other's languages, but to also mix it up and not be so one dimensional. Be open to the others.
Well, the thing is also, and this is what I believe the reason they wrote the book was to really recognize that as adults, sometimes we do find ourselves wondering if the other person loves us or not, because the way that one person expresses or feels their love language is different from the other person's love language. And so
Hmm.
if you don't realize that your partner needs to hear you tell them you love them, whereas you think all you got to do is touch their hand and they'll know you love them, there's a miscommunication. It's almost like speaking different languages. So the understanding that to learn whether you both take the test or however you do it, what is your primary way of confirming that you're being loved? So then you can provide that resource for the other person. And that's really, because that in a way is in itself an expression of love, that you want to find out what makes them feel loved.
100%.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's so important. I mean, it's like when somebody has a sense of humor, or they have a certain sense of humor, and they're like, "Well, I'm just being funny," and it's offensive to the other person. And, like with
Oh, yeah.
children, raising children, I used to say to them, if the other person's not laughing, it's not funny. It's like, you've got to know your audience.
Yes.
It's the same thing with the love languages. There's I was watching an episode of, I love watching intervention. It's just such a, I just, because I love the human condition, and I love seeing people just recover and things like that. But I remember watching one recently where one of the parents was, the child that was struggling with the addiction had never heard the words "I love you" from their parent, and it was so often the same thing: not feeling loved, or not feeling unconditionally loved by a parent. I remember this parent, and it was a woman, and she was just like, she just said, the way I grew up, I cannot use that word. I will not use that word. And I just thought, it's even when somebody is saying to you how important hearing "I love you" is, you're still, as a full grown adult, going to deny them that love, because
Hmm.
I don't do that. I don't say that. That's not the way I was brought up. And it just felt so withholding to me, even though, well, it was withholding, because what does it
Yeah,
cost
but
you?
it sounds also like there's so much pain that she has tied into it that there's no room for her to say it, because it would just bring up too much stuff for herself. So she's more afraid of her own upset than she's about the gift that she can give to a child.
Yeah, exactly. Who is an
So,
adult now, struggling because of this lack of feeling loved, because obviously their love language was to hear it. It wasn't
right.
just, food on the table and clean clothes and a clean house. It was like, I need either physical affection or words to say I love you. I mean,
Hmm.
how many of our generation say, "Oh no, my parents never told me they loved me"? I mean, thank goodness my mum, even though she was very busy and absent a lot, I definitely knew that she loved me.
Yeah. And that's the other part too, is that because again, the Love Language was a book written a while ago, is that our parents didn't necessarily understand it. So the way each of our, I mean, I know from my experience, my parents were very different in a lot of ways, which a lot of parents are. So how each parent expresses their love language unconsciously
Hmm.
can be different. So as a child, we get more than one love language given to us because our parents are different.
Mm.
So that, I mean, understanding different, so what I guess the thing I'm trying to say is that this idea about love languages is at least be aware that when you meet somebody you're interested in, they may not speak the same language you do when it comes to love. So be open to learning a new language.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I'm just, as you were saying that, I was just thinking to myself, gosh, I only had a mother, so I was only really, and I can't even really think what my own mother's love language would be. I'm going to have to think about that one. But what would you say your parents' love language was?
Um, my dad definitely was. I would call it. I call it acts of service because he went to work to take care of the family. He didn't provide lots of money to the family. It wasn't like gifts, that sort of thing. The acts of service that he made sure we were safe, that we were taken care of that level.
Hmm.
My mum's was. Um, it's interesting because she was a blend
Hmm.
because she had the sense of words of affirmation, but also, I guess, in a way, she was acts of service too because she took care of the family. She was very much like showed her love through her cooking, through the way she took care of the house, took care of us. Those were all different ways she did things that were serving us. So I
Yeah.
guess in a way, maybe there was a common language in my parents was acts of service, was different, just expressed different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. So as I asked you that question, I'm still, thinking to myself here, well, okay, I can't really identify what my mother's were maybe acts of service. But as I said, she was so absent. Certainly wasn't quality time. There were no gifts, and that was because of financially. I think later in life she definitely was. As she made money, she shared money. She gave us gifts for sure. But I was thinking for myself as a parent, I look at those three things, and I know that I cover all of them equally. I'm very physically affectionate with my children. We're always hugging and kissing,
Hmm.
like the snuggling. Quality time absolutely is very important to me. And my eldest son is living with me right now, and I cannot believe how much sports I'm watching. You can
A
tell,
sacrifice.
not the first half, but I just think, you know what, he's going to be moving out again. It's quality time. It's what he enjoys. So I join him and we watch
Hmm.
lots and lots of sports. Used to be just football, and then it became oh God, what's the word? Forgetting whatever the Dodgers play. Um,
Basically,
baseball. I want to say rounders. No, it wasn't rounders.
that was.
And then some other things. But and then the gifts, as I said, and words and acts. So I feel like I really cover the gamut in how I express my love. Um, you know,
Well, that's the thing. That there's no requirement you must have one love language, and
exactly.
it isn't so much. Also, you got to keep track of giving 20% here, 20% there, 20% like that sort of thing either. It's more about being in a flow, but also being authentic. And yes, ideally, as long as the person you're with, you, I'll say satisfy is the wrong word, but you match them on the love language they express naturally, so that way they do receive it.
Yeah.
The challenge again is like if the person you're with who doesn't, if you're around some stranger, somebody new you're dating or meeting who hasn't learned this, they just have a belief about love expressed one way to them. It comes to a
Mm-hmm.
certain channel, and if you know what it is and you can reach them, they may feel more love than they've ever felt before because you match their level of their love language in a way that works.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be fun to explore that with people.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So let's see. So when you're with somebody, you've explained what your primary love languages are, which, as you said, the physical touch and the acts of service,
No quality time.
quality time. Sorry, that was right. So, how are you with when you say quality time? Define that. Is that like you like to spend lots of time with a partner, or when you're together, it's like no distractions. It's just you're there for each other.
It's the latter because quality time is different from quantity of time, which is not language, but it's like the idea of the quality of time because we have busy lives, and the challenge, especially nowadays, I mean, frankly, God, with everybody on their smartphones, to
Yeah.
find quality time with somebody else isn't easy. So it's like to have time with somebody where your phones are put away with just you. And it can be, I mean, it can also be quality time watching Netflix, but
Yeah.
it's quality time together where you're basically unified and you're enjoying each other's space. That can be quality time as well. So it's not necessarily about quality time nose to nose. That's not the requirement, but it's being it's being invested in being together when there is time, because sometimes it can't be all the time because of life.
Yeah, yeah. No, exactly. And I was just thinking with some of the things that I know that upset me and my partner's amazing. He's so lovely. I can just tell him, and he's, I think he always remembers by any means, but he will. But things like the um, when you're communicating with somebody, you're talking to somebody, and they pick up their phone or they're on the computer and they say, "Oh, I'm listening," and it's like, no, no.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one of my pet peeves.
Oh, to me, it's like we're not
Well,
talking. Then you close
for me,
the computer, you put your phone over. It's real communication, or no, or just don't. I mean,
well, that's the thing for me is that I know myself to know that if I'm talking to somebody and I then look at my phone, I've lost them. So I know it won't the same back. So it's like, if we want to stay in presence with each other, I need to not look at my phone when we're talking so I can stay present with you. So I know for myself, my own self-sabotage or my own distraction can get in the way. So I presume it's going to be for other people too.
yeah, yeah. I know it's so funny. But and then the other thing is when I first met Hootie, we've been together for gosh now 14 years or more even,
Hmm.
14 years. And when I first met him, he he's Israeli, and nobody had ever sort of, I don't know if it's a cultural thing or whatever, but he would never. I was so used to when a man would come and pick you up, they'd be like, "Oh, you look lovely. Oh, you look very nice tonight." So, and it wasn't on his radar to say those things.
Right. Yeah.
And I remember saying like, how old are you now? Like 50 something or whatever at the time, going, you've got this far in life and you've never complimented a woman when you've come to pick her up. But he's so good at it now. I mean, like almost like every day, it's like, oh, you're so beautiful. You're so gorgeous. Like, it doesn't have to be every day, but I
Right.
I think, compliments, I think recognizing when somebody's made an effort, um,
Yeah.
whether it's, and that's the other thing, the words of affirmation are not just like, oh, you're great, but it's the,
Genuine appreciation, frankly.
exactly, the genuine appreciation for the tiniest little thing. I mean,
Hmm.
and that is one thing I definitely know with Hootie and I. I call it the bank account of goodwill. We recognize and fill each other up by acknowledging the little things like, oh, thank you for setting the table for me while I was finishing dinner.
Hmm.
Without me having to ask you, um,
Right.
or thank you for just seeing things, being aware. I mean, we always talk about this. It always comes back to not just self-awareness, but being aware of your partner and
Yeah.
and where they are in their life or in that day even. What sort of day have they had? What do they need from you? What do they want from you?
That's truly that's in a way a form of acts of service, is that you're being so consciously aware of your partner that you can do things for them they weren't even aware they needed,
Hmm.
which means such a gift. So yeah, that's a beautiful way of doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so I would encourage everybody to read the book, or at least look into it and entertain it and see where you might be that you express your love in across the board, or it might be that you just have a particular pattern that a groove that you've been in for most of your life, whether it was dictated by your childhood or not. But to open yourself up to all acts of love, I think is a really, I mean, you might be surprised at how good it feels to show your love in a way that wouldn't normally be on your radar, and vice versa.
And for certain, if you haven't already done so, definitely take the test online. You just go to, I think it's 5livelanguages.com, and maybe the number or the words or both. They probably are both, frankly. Just go take the test. And if you're in a relationship, both take the test. You
Mm,
might discover new things about each other that you can explore. And then if you want to find out more, get the book. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. All right, wonderful. Well, anything else
Cool.
to add today?
No, that's a good start. There's definitely more to discuss, I'm sure, but that'll get everybody started who's listening to this.
All right, wonderful. Well, have a wonderful week, and thank you again, Barry. Love our
Thank you.
chats.
We'll see you next week.
All right, take care. Bye bye.
We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode, fresh and shiny, as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.